This rhetoric about Bitcoin is dangerous. So how did it all start? Well, basically, I asked a few questions on a Bitcoin live stream. These individuals were on a podcast.
And we got a super chat there from
Oh yeah.
Kaspa Onion.
They're all Bitcoin advocates. The objective here is supposed to be to escape fiat. However, this podcast is pushing in the opposite direction of Bitcoin. So these guys have good hearts. They mean well. They really want to educate people on Bitcoin. However, they are deeply uneducated, and being uneducated is very dangerous when running a node. They're preaching to an audience about Bitcoin. These guys are trusted individuals. And if people are being fed the wrong data and they're also running nodes, what happens to Bitcoin, right?
It's very, very complicated. And when I was trying to understand it on Twitter, basically I came to the conclusion that it seems like basically the only people who understand it are the people who invented it. Like nobody else understands it. The technology of it is very complicated.
My profile picture is Kaspa related. The comment was Bitcoin related. The conversation became Kaspa related. I was asking a question about Bitcoin nodes and the logic behind them. The clip you just saw was basically dismissing Kaspa because it's too hard to learn. The same way Bitcoin was dismissed in 2014 because it was too hard to learn. If it's hard to learn, it must be complicated and not real, right? A common theme you're going to see in this video is my channel's a Kaspa channel. I'm not talking at all about Kaspa in this video. I don't care about Kaspa. This video is only focused on Bitcoin and the mechanics of Bitcoin. And all of their talking points show that they don't know anything about Bitcoin. In their minds, they're comparing Bitcoin versus Kaspa as if one is better than the other. But what they don't understand is the mechanics that they're complaining about are identical mechanics in Bitcoin. They are literally talking about Bitcoin and they do not even know it. They do not know the moving parts of Bitcoin. And so when they're talking bad about it, it's major risk. Also, I just want to mention all three of these guys, they're not bad people. They're good people. They actually are advocating for sound money. They're putting their foot forward. They're in the public eye. So I respect them for that. I respect them for trying to get people off of the road of fiat and into the road of Bitcoin and sound money. However, they just get so much wrong, and I think we need to have a discussion. We need to have a discussion about sound money, not just Bitcoin. But there's this dismissive tone to anything that's not Bitcoin. And so there's this duality of they don't even understand the moving mechanics of Bitcoin, and there's the other part of this duality. They want to dismiss anything that's not Bitcoin. So they're uneducated and they dismiss anything that doesn't align with what they already know. That's why this video exists. I also just want to mention that I kind of nail into these guys pretty hard in this video. The intention is to be educational, and the reason I lean into them so hard and I'm very critical is because the broader thing that matters most is sound money. And I think a lot is on the line if we do not advocate for sound money and we dismiss things to improve sound money. This video is all about how do we improve sound money and question it. And I'm dismissed so much. Now, I do just want to mention these guys actually did a very good job. I posted a super chat twice. They actually took time to answer it. They could have not have done that, so I'm very thankful on that. So these guys do care. They are good people, okay? So be nice. Everyone has their own learning curve in Bitcoin. It took me so long to understand Bitcoin. I'm still learning about Bitcoin, all right? I'm still learning about Kaspa. We all are learning here, but what I do not like is how it's dismissed. And so if you're going to be uneducated on something, you should not dismiss the other side. If you're uneducated, the way to make up for it is to be curious, to learn, and want to understand, right? And things are the stakes are pretty high when you're a public figure and people listen to your word as gospel. So yes, I am a little harsh in this video, but it's for the overall to prove a point. But these guys are good people. I love what they do. I support them and I watch their videos, and I think they should keep doing what they're doing. So that being said, let's get started. So because of what they preach, it puts Bitcoin at risk, and I don't like that. So I feel obligated that I have to educate. And I will be backing up everything I say in this video. So what arguments did they make? Why am I making a video on this, right? They said that raw data is more important than cryptographic proofs.
It has a full transaction history that anyone in the world can download. The entire blockchain for Bitcoin measures at around 647 gigabytes, 600, and you can see the transactions actually happening. So with Bitcoin, the blocks are smaller, but you can have thousands of copies of the entire blockchain, and that's what gives Bitcoin so much value.
Right? And why am I even complaining about this? Why is this the problem, right? Well, their logic is that raw data is greater than cryptographic proofs. Raw data you can see with your eyeballs,
And that's what gives Bitcoin so much value.
and you can trust and you can verify it. Whereas to them, a cryptographic proof, it's like, how can you trust that? What is that, right?
You keep going down the rabbit hole and you're like, but somebody is feeding you the pruning proof. Where'd he get it from? What if he lied? Like, what if his node lied? Like, at some point,
He says pruning proof, but what he doesn't realize is that the cryptographic proof is only what allows Bitcoin archival nodes to work. Without that, Bitcoin archival nodes are useless. They do not function. You need the cryptographic proof in Bitcoin. So to say related to Kaspa, this has nothing to do with Kaspa. This just shows that they do not know what they're talking about. Completely understandable. How do you audit that, right? Well, am I just cherry picking something for the random sake of a video, right? Okay, well, guess what? A cryptographic proof, it's not about whether it's better or worse versus raw data and what you think or what I think. A cryptographic proof is the core mechanic of Bitcoin's auditability.
You have to rely on them. With Bitcoin, it's just a math equation. There's literally just a math equation that Bitcoin relies on, and that's the supply.
This is another clip that shows they do not know at all what they're talking about. He says that Bitcoin is a math equation. Yes, but he believes that the only math equation is the number go up, the digital scarcity. But they completely ignore the whole cryptographic proof. That's the whole point of Bitcoin, but they spent 10 minutes on their podcast talking about why cryptographic proofs are irrelevant. It's the ability to have self-custody. So it's not about whether you like it or not. It's about this is how Bitcoin works, and this is how it's invented in a trustless, decentralized way that prevents fraud.
See, you said that so seriously, but I find that so funny because there's a whole group of people, like all the shitcoiners, think that pruned nodes are the answer. People can't explain it for themselves. So this thing it's a joke. I don't think this needs to really.
I don't even understand this comment.
And so much more. And we also have self-custody because of cryptographic proofs. So if you are advocating against that, like these guys, and they want raw data over cryptographic proof, that is so dangerous to Bitcoin, and we're basically back at fiat land. So I don't want us to go to fiat. They need to learn about this. Okay, so let's get started. So like I said, they are advocating that raw data is greater than having cryptographic proofs regarding transaction history, right? They like this because raw data you can read with your eyeball. I can see what the transaction history looks like with my eyes, right? I don't know what a cryptographic proof means, so that's risky. And that makes sense. That's totally understandable. So let's see, though, what Bitcoin has to say about this, right? There's their argument, but what does Satoshi have to say? What does Bitcoin have to say? So here we have a bunch of Bitcoin transactions. So I can see one from 10 years ago, or I could see one from 10 days ago, right? This is the open ledger that I can look at with my eyeballs, right? And this is what's nice about Bitcoin. It's open, I can look at it with my eyeballs, and I can see it. And so therefore, I can trust it, right? That's their argument, okay? It's 100% transparent and audible with my eyeballs. Okay, so according to these guys' logic, what other systems do they like? Well, let's take a look at a bank statement. I can look at it with my eyeballs. These are transactions that have history that I can look at with my eye, and I can audit bank statements, right? So which ledger is better? Both I'm auditing with my eyeball, both are transaction histories, and both can be looked at from 10 years ago to 10 days ago, right? So which is better? The one with the cryptographic proof is better. The one part I left out of all of that makes both of them different is the cryptographic proof. Bitcoin only exists because of that. So I'm going to explain that in a second. So how can we trust it? How do we know what the purpose of a cryptographic proof is? Why is it that the ledger of Bitcoin has a cryptographic proof? Why doesn't the ledger of Wells Fargo have a cryptographic proof, right? Well, what's the problem with fiat?
where'd he get it from? What if he lied? Like, what if his node lied? Like, at some point,
the problem with fiat is that it doesn't have a cryptographic proof, and it lacks that, and because it lacks that, every transaction is completely with made-up rules and completely reversible. So the sole purpose of a cryptographic proof is to have irreversibility And there's this whole trustless nature that also follows, and I'm going to be explaining that in a bit. So you might want transaction history on the Bitcoin network, and you might want to be able to see it with your eyeballs, but it's only able to be trusted, not because you can see it, but because of the cryptographic proof. Don't believe me? If you don't believe what I just said, right? I dare you to upload a bunch of transactions to the Bitcoin network and let me know which ones get accepted, right? The only ones that are going to be accepted to the Bitcoin network are going to be the ones with the cryptographic proof. So if you have identical transactions without the proof and you have transactions with the proof, the only ones that will be accepted will be the ones with the proof.
I don't even understand this.
So now, why is this string of proof so valuable? Why does the Bitcoin network only rely on the cryptographic proof? Why is this so important if it's missing this, right?
Where'd he get it from? What if he lied? Like, what if his node lied?
Well, let's ask these guys. The whole purpose of mining is to spend an immense amount of money to get that cryptographic proof. That is why we mine in Bitcoin. We mine, the whole mining process is to look at transactions and fight who gets that cryptographic proof every 10 minutes. Who gets to be the one to be the mathematical stamp? Who gets the one to be the mathematical notary?
There's literally just a math equation that Bitcoin relies on, and that's the supply.
Yes, it's a math equation, but it is so much more than just the number go up math equation. It's the cryptographic proof equation. It's the whole invention of the blockchain. Every block is chained to the previous block with the hash that is the cryptographic proof. That is what a cryptographic proof is in Bitcoin, and that is its value. But why do we need this? Are we just stamping for fun? Are we just mathematically just stamping for fun? You know, just this is just completely random, right? Well, no. You are not accepted in Bitcoin if you do not have this cryptographic proof. The whole point of this cryptographic proof is that it's expensive. So you are not accepted in Bitcoin if you do not have that cryptographic proof. The whole network relies on that. That's the first half of this argument. Without that proof, we have fiat. And how do we know this? We have easily reversible transactions in fiat. The cost of fraud is zero without that proof. So it is the cryptographic proof that is all of Bitcoin's value is tied to. That proof is so hard to get. All these mining companies are paying millions and billions of dollars to be able to fight for the ability to get that proof. And the proof has value because of how expensive it is. Because if you want to commit fraud on Bitcoin, you need to get 51% of these proofs in a certain amount of time. This is the cost of fraud. So this is the defense mechanism of Bitcoin, and these guys are advocating that it has no value. They prefer transaction history, which is no different than fiat.
People can't explain it for themselves.
It's the cryptographic proof that protects the network, and that's the whole point of hash power. So Bitcoin doesn't care what you think. It cares about the cryptographic proof instead. So this is why these guys are cited on the white paper and not these guys. So what's the other half of this argument? Well, why are there 10 more minutes to this video, right? Well, what I've just shown you is the danger of not having a cryptographic proof. We're basically back in fiat land.
Where'd he get it from? What if he lied? Like, what if his node lied?
Okay, well, I've also shown you what the most important thing in Bitcoin is. It's having that proof. Proof of work, cryptographic proof. It's like these things are married to each other. So the next argument after this that they're going to say, I understand why they would say it, however, it makes no sense. Their next argument is going to be, I want that cryptographic proof and the raw data, right? They want to be able to see the transaction history and the raw data. Okay, that makes sense because, okay, at first you're saying you don't want the proof, but now you're saying, well, okay, well, let's have both. Let's have both, okay? All right, that's fair. I understand that. I just proved that the only thing you need is the proof. So why not have both, right? Why not have the proof and the raw data? Well, guess what? Things get really risky and dangerous when you have to store other things that are not the cryptographic proof. And let me explain. Cryptographic proof is good. Cryptographic proof and raw data is dangerous. So we need to look at other instances of cryptographic proofs in Bitcoin to understand the second half of the argument. property rights, and self-custody. Cold storage only exists because of cryptographic proofs. Without cryptographic proofs, you would have to share your seed phrase with everyone. Imagine not having a cold storage device. Imagine if you wanted to transact with me and you had to tell me your seed phrase. It is the cryptographic proof that allows me to not show my cards. Cryptographic proofs allow me to not show my private key to the world. For the most important part of Bitcoin itself, sending and receiving money, it is the cryptographic proof of the private key, transferring value from one party to another. The only thing required to do the most important thing in Bitcoin is a cryptographic proof. It's a hash of my private key that's irreversible. Because of cryptographic proofs, on its own, it's 100% trustworthy. That's all Bitcoin requires. If a cryptographic proof was untrustworthy on its own and it couldn't stand on its own two legs, Satoshi would have designed Bitcoin a little bit differently. So what if I said, I don't trust that the cryptographic proof means anything. I don't trust that it means the Bitcoin you're sending me is what you actually own. I don't trust the proof. I need to see the seed phrase. I need to see the proof and the raw data itself. That would be ridiculous because we all know the proof is enough to stand on its own 2 feet. Instead of sending a Bitcoin transaction with the cryptographic proof of your private key, you would have to send the cryptographic proof and the raw data, which is your seed phrase. So there's safety in only people knowing the cryptographic proof of your seed and not have to share your seed phrase as well. So if you share both, there's a trade-off, right? The same logic can be applied to Bitcoin transaction history. So only you should have both. Only you should have the cryptographic proof and the raw data, right? But only the public should have just the proof. They don't need the raw data. Otherwise, they have your private key. Well, we can apply this exact same logic to transaction history. Transaction history should be treated the same way. However, Bitcoin forces you to have the raw data and the cryptographic proof. And I just pointed out how dangerous that is with private keys. So people don't know this, but it also carries a lot of risk if you apply that same logic that we applied to private keys, if you apply it to transaction histories. So there's an immense amount of risk if we do this to Bitcoin. So raw data and cryptographic proof publicly broadcasted have the following risks to Bitcoin. It makes Bitcoin slower and slower. It has more expensive fees. On top of that, it risks decentralization and, there's the potential for illegal content. Now, everything I just mentioned doesn't sound that bad, but these things only get worse and it starts to get exponential. And eventually, all of these are going to cripple Bitcoin. So if you don't want to risk sound money disappearing, study Kaspa. Kaspa solves all of this. So Bitcoin helps you understand fiat better. Kaspa helps you understand Bitcoin better. And because I study Kaspa, I was able to educate these guys more about Bitcoin and sound money. So I will have another video about these guys as well. They shared a bunch of other stuff on this podcast that I strongly disagree with and I think is very dangerous to either Bitcoin or finance as well. So I have to share that. If you're a paranoid Bitcoiner, study Kaspa. There's more explanations on the way. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, peace.